Okay, got it. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm sure everyone is exhausted from shoveling snow all day. We got about 8 inches of snow here over the night and this morning, so that's always fun to clean up. Yeah, I'm going to show you guys, kind of go through just mainly photos. I'm not going to get real in depth on the details, but just kind of show you guys what I got going on, what I've been doing, and hopefully kind of give you guys some insight on, how this can help you guys in your farm. So let's get into it. So, there's a lot of reasons, obviously. I want to improve the soil on the farm, reduce my inputs is a big one. And preserve the farm for the next generation. That's something that is really weighing on my mind a lot more nowadays. Having my own son now kind of really changed the way I look at the operation. Am I doing enough to preserve this ground and make sure that it's going to be in good, if not better shape when I leave it, in his hands, or whoever does get it next. He might not want a farm, so I can't blame him. But I hope he does, and I want to make it fun for him growing up. So my main motivation, with the wide row corn, I think a lot of people don't, I'm going all in with all 60-inch corn and with the cover crops, kind of take it to the extreme. But for me, it's the malting barley. I run an operation, I run a business, malting barley, and it's proven to be very difficult to grow here in Iowa. With the rain events we have, the humidity, the dew at night, and then the hybrids are really lacking in the technology and the breeding programs. We're almost 20 years behind hops at this point with barley. So I'm doing what I can to combat the disease, and I've taken a closer look at the soil. If I can get a healthier soil, more active soil that can fight that pathogenic disease, I'm going to do everything I can on my cash crops on the rotation to improve that soil. So when it does go to my malting barley, which is my main crop for my business, that's my main goal with this. So I'm not exactly chasing after yields and cutting back all these inputs. It's really after the malting barley for me. So obviously not everyone's going to have that same approach as I am, but that should explain to you guys kind of why I'm doing some of the crazy stuff I'm doing. So back in 2018, I tried interseeding for the first time. I just used a 3-point drill, drilled 2 rows between 30-inch corn. And this is what I had. The mix on the left, 15 pounds of brassica clover grass, annual ryegrass. You can see it is growing here, but it all died away. It all shaded out, died, and disappeared. And all that was left behind was this annual ryegrass. And actually, I'd say about 70% of that actually survived. It definitely made a difference where it got more sunlight. So if the corn was shorter over sand or didn't have as much manure applied in that area, it actually grew a lot better. So sunlight has a lot to do, with this interseeding. You can really definitely make this work in 30-inch corn, but you got to be careful. You really got to look at what hybrids you're using and the population you're using. That plays a pretty big role in getting this stuff to survive. So that's a pretty key point in making this work. Soil temps, definitely a big change in soil temps. You're keeping that ground covered. Those roots are holding moisture in place. From what I've seen, there's always about a 15-degree average between interseeded and not interseeded. And this was a 20 pounds of annual ryegrass. It had a pretty hard time over the summer. It was, got pretty spindly and almost looked like it was going to die. Then once the corn starts drying down, it really takes off. And then after harvest, it really looks nice. So I was pretty happy with the results on the annual ryegrass at 20 pounds. And then what I do the next year, I'll put on steel rye in the fall with a vertical till after the corn comes out. So I'll go right over top of this with a vertical till, and I basically just stirring up the corn stalks. I don't put the vertical till in the ground. Just kind of stirring everything up and getting that seed down to the soil. And that way it'll start growing in the fall. Come spring, I'll plant into it when it's about 8 inches tall. And then I'll terminate it 6 to 8 weeks after planting. Basically when I don't want that rye to go into reproduction stage. So I terminate it, before it's going to start pollinating. Yeah, because you can see right here. Actually, I'm going to turn on my little pointer. I've never used that.
Hey, Eric, could you also clarify what varieties you're talking about? We had a question in the chat about that.
Varieties on the corn?
Annual rye.
Oh, and the annual ryegrass? I actually don't know. I got it from, that year I got it from Prairie Creek Seed. So I have no idea what kind it was. But it did, I'd say a good majority of it did overwinter. So I was surprised because a lot of people said it wouldn't. But you can see here the beans. I set my GPS and planted the beans right in between the 2 rows of annual ryegrass. And then here, I'm actually terminating that cereal rye at this point. And this is the edge of the field. It's pretty thin, but you get a good idea what the annual ryegrass look like. And then the beans here. And I was really happy with how that worked. I did that last year and I did everything like that this year too. And just the erosion control is worth it alone. This is an example right here in this field is a no-till field just over the hill from this one. So this field has beans planted in it. As you obviously can't see them, but that cereal rye, had a pretty big rain event and it held everything in place because usually this is actually a dike right here and it's just a small tile line. It's probably too small because it usually ponds up. But in this case, after that rain event, it did not pond up like it usually does. So I was really surprised by that. And then you go over the hill and this field's been no-till for how many years and you're still getting, still a runoff from it. So it's just frustrating to see that. Still being no-till and still seeing soil running off your field, it's like I got to do something better, and that's where I really like planting beans into that rye. It's so easy to do, and I have not seen any yield drawbacks from it. So I definitely would tell anybody to give that a try because I think that's kind of hard to screw up. But you get into corn's a whole different animal, planting corn in rye, and that's where you should really do a lot of research before you jump into that. Another example, you can see the beans going into the annual ryegrass here. I did some different termination at different timing just to see if it made a difference. I didn't see any yield difference at all. And actually, this piece here had no rye at all planted. And that was corn on corn for 2 years, whereas this was corn for 1 year, and it still had no yield difference. So this is where I started down the path of the 60-inch corn. This is actually a planter we built for planting soybeans in between the corn stalks, and worked really well. It's set up to offset the seed. You can actually set the timing on these units so you can do a diamond. You can kind of see it in the picture. It'll actually plant a diamond pattern. And I bought some corn meters for it and just tried 25 acres. And this is the first time back in 2019 that corn was coming up. And yeah, that planter does a really nice job. I'm a big fan of the monosome planters. This is that was 2019. I put this little interseeder together, just kind of threw it together quick. Really nothing special, but it got the job done. The only downside I would say is I think I had more of a weed problem. I had it under control, but after I went through, you're loosening that topsoil, you're exposing more weed seeds to the surface. So 2020, I actually went to a drill and actually ditched the rotary hoe just to try to get better seed to soil contact for one, and then less soil disturbance. And then if there are, if there is any herbicide issues, that drill will probably do a little better job of cutting, getting down underneath that surface where the residue is sitting. So 2019, this was the mix, just a kind of a basic 7-way mix. Pretty happy with how that mix turned out. I would recommend, going 7 to 8 species. You can go all the way up to 12. I've been going higher than that just to kind of see what species do better, and then I can tweak my mix for the next year. But keep it simple. Don't get too crazy with it. Definitely keep. I'd say definitely have annual ryegrass in there. I think that does an excellent job of weed control, and just the areas when I see interseeded the 30-inch corn at the end of the field where I turn around, I'd pick up the drill and it would still be dropping that ryegrass out of the drill, and I'd turn around and drive back in. It wasn't doing it anymore. But where I knocked down the corn in the end rows, I would have pigweed growing where there was no seed, but where I came out of the row and the seed was dropping out, it was all annual ryegrass and not a single pigweed at all. So I knew right away that it was doing a good job of, suppressing the weeds. And obviously, you get something established quicker before the weeds can, they're going to compete with each other. And yeah, this was that 2019, that summer. This was that first little bit coming up. There was actually a couple different mixes. Part of the field had more brassicas in it, more clovers. And you can kind of see here where they're a little more dominant with the brassicas, the radishes, and a lot more clover. And on the left here was where they were mixed together. So there's a little bit more diversity in the left side, and the rate was a little bit higher. And I noticed with the higher rate, I did not have any weeds at all. So that's where 2020, I went with a pretty high rate on my seed just to get good weed control. I think that's kind of number one. One of the major points I want to make is, I went with 36 pounds an acre with my interseeded, and I'd say go all of that, 35 to 40 pounds an acre. Just if you do have a weed problem. If not, then you can cut your rate back and you'll be just fine. But is it overkill? Yeah. Is it expensive? Yeah. But I want that good weed control. And, obviously these plants don't grow to full height. So you kind of almost need more plants in a smaller area because that plant doesn't fill out like they typically do, being shaded by the corn. These wide rows, they are still shading. And it's actually amazing how on the higher fertility soil, I did not have growth like this. It was maybe 8 inches tall at the most. It was pretty dwindly, pretty thin, just because the corn actually canopied was smothering all the sunlight out with these wide rows. So, for higher fertility ground, you're going to get more shade, and hybrid selection plays a pretty big role. If you choose a hybrid that's short with upright leaves, you're going to get a lot more sunlight. You're going to get growth like you see here. In these pictures, this was a sandy area. So the corn was pretty short and it was getting a lot more sunlight. So it was getting a lot more growth. But the one thing I really like about that is, this sandy soil is obviously not very productive. And with these cover crops growing like the way they do, they're getting a lot bigger, producing a lot more biomass, a lot more green manure. With them doing that in the sandy areas, it's going to bring that sand back into production a lot faster. Just the fact that the covers are getting bigger because the corn's so short. So that's one of the things that I loved about the system is, that we have a lot of poor areas in the farm. It almost naturally heals itself. The shorter the corn is going to be, the more sunlight you're getting into these covers, and these covers are what's going to fix your soil. So one thing I really, really like about the system is how quickly it's fixing this, I mean, it's just blow sand right next to the field. A lot of it went into CRP because it just isn't worth farming. But if I can use corn, get a cash crop off it and bring it back, basically bring it back to life and put carbon back in the ground and make it productive again, then I'm ecstatic about it. I'm definitely going to keep going down this path. Sorry, I'm rambling. I kind of get off topic sometimes. This is a shot from the drone looking across the field. I thought this is a cool picture. And then this is the same hybrid in the left and 60-inch rows. And then on the right side, just the 30-inch rows. And so that was why I did my comparison. The field, it wasn't in trial strips in the same field, but it was a field very close to this one. And I based everything off the same soil type. It all got the same herbicide, it got the same manure applied. Everything was done the same, except the planter, just use a different planter. So,
hey, Eric, and we did have a question in the comments box about your herbicide program. So I don't want to interrupt you if you're going to
oh, yeah.
that later.
Nope, that's probably the number one question I get. What herbicide do I use? What's been working for me is a week before I interseed, I'll go out with glyphosate and 1 ounce of status. Just 1 ounce is all it takes. And if you have it takes about a week for that to wear off. So you want to do that a week before you interseed. Unless you get a rain, the rain will deactivate it. Then you can get in there and interseed right away. That's been working really well for me. 2020, just this last year, I started planting my corn into rye. So, obviously I got to go with an extra pass to terminate that rye. And then I go back about a month later, now about 3.5 weeks, spray my status, 1 ounce status with the glyphosate, and that's it. And then I'll go in and interseed, and that's it. So pretty simple program. And it's been working for 3 years now. So.
And can I ask one other clarifying question? There was also someone wondered about the row spacing on your corn and the twin row spacing. Could you just clarify for the recording too what the spacing is on your rows?
Yeah, I guess this is a good picture here. I'm just using a regular 30-inch corn head. The spacing of the rows, these rows are actually 7 inches apart. So I actually widened them to 8 inches apart last year. So that gives me 52 inches of spacing between the plants, between the widest part. But it works really well. This year I harvested 200 acres of 60-inch corn. Corn had never plugged once, never once. Even with all the green stuff growing, everyone was asking how it goes through the head. Last year I had a lot of gourds growing, hanging off the corn. I was concerned that was going to be an issue, but I never had a problem. It never plugged once. And you basically drive like normal. And the one thing I really like about the twin rows is when they hit the snoots, they kind of hug each other and fall down through the rollers. I'd say the ears don't bounce nearly as much as they would as if they were in one row. They kind of get bouncing around. But in twin rows, they kind of hug each other and get pulled down into the head. And it seems to be a lot more gentle. And it seems like I'm having a lot less shelling at the head too. So pretty big fan of that. I thought this is a pretty neat picture. So both cornfields, they were harvested 1 day apart. And as you can see, there's not a track out here. I think that picture itself says 1,000 words of what these living plants are doing. And the equipment that I'm using is fairly bigger too. And even still, pulling a 1,000 bushel grain cart across this field, I mean, it wasn't leaving any tracks or leaving any ruts or nothing. It just, those roots carried it. And I was really, really impressed with how well, even as small as these plants were, they're still have that ability to carry heavy equipment across the field. And you even see here on the right side, this is from a pickup. Some hunters going back and forth. You know, they left some ruts on the edge of the field. But the combine, the grain cart, you can see the grain cart turn around here and right here. You know, there's no mud. So that was probably one of my favorite pictures. Yeah, 2019, this is just where I compared, same soil type, about 5 acres, same fertility, same everything, just different planters. And yeah, I mean, maybe I got lucky, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to be yielding any less. If anything, if you pick the right hybrid that's going to capture more sunlight, I think you can get a little bit more yields out of it. But that's obviously not something I'm really after. I'm really after the fertility side for my malting barley, and that's really what what I'm chasing is building my soil health. But obviously, people are always asking, "What are the yields? What are the yields?" I mean, yeah, the system does yield. So if you do it right, and that I wouldn't be scared, to try it. This is the soil map of that field. You can see the sand kind of starts in right through here, and the rest of this field, almost half of it is pretty much below sand. There's a couple of good spots up in the corner here, but for the most part, like this got this little triangle here we put into CRP because it's just so sandy. We can't get any. It's not worth spending the inputs on it. But it's a really good test to see how quickly this sand is going to come back into production using this system. I keep putting that carbon back in the ground, keep the roots in the ground all year round. I think the fertility is going to come back pretty fast. And it already seems like, just in 2020, we didn't get rain for 6 weeks. And this corn held its, it stayed green for a long time. Really thought it was going to burn up faster. And it was amazing how long that it held on before it started to burn up. So I think there's definitely something to be said there. But next one. So it was, since I liked the system and I knew it yielded, I decided to build a full-size planter. I just picked this up. It's just a Case IH 1200 bar. It was first part of April last year. I drug it into the shop here, started working on it, and a month later I was planting with it. So threw it together pretty fast, but pretty happy with how it worked. There's a lot of changes I want to do yet, but so far I'm really, really happy. I put these are STP blades. You see they got like a serrated edge, and I put them on so I could cut through the seal rye because I wanted to plant my corn in a rye. And I put those on and left the row cleaners off. And I actually did about 50 acres corn on 30-inch corn. And it had no problem. I'm really impressed with these blades. It did take more down pressure, and it seemed like it took a little while for them to sharpen up. But once they got a nice sharp edge on them, they worked fantastic. So I'm a big, big fan of those. And the closing wheels too worked really nice. What I did was I took my Valmar air seeder, took it off my vertical till that I used to put my seal rye on, and I just mounted it up on the bar. Obviously where the central commodity usually sits. And then I put the single disc John Deere units in front of the twin rows. So that way I can place fertilizer down in between the twin rows about 4 inches from that seed. And I was putting on a rate this year, about 150 to 175 pounds an acre. I can't remember off the top of my head what rate was, but it came out to be about 20 units of nitrogen. I'm going to bump that up this year to 50, and maybe someday I can, put all my nitrogen down with the planter and be done. But I do go back and I do Y drop with my sprayer. That's what I've been doing, is banding my fertilizer. I think that's another big point I want to make, and I'll explain here in a minute. But yeah, here you can see after I made a pass through the rye, you can hardly tell. And those blades, those STP blades, man, I'm a big fan. They're pretty awesome. And then the copperhead closing wheels did a nice job of zipping them shut. Good seed soil contact, and planting into that rye it's awesome. I love it. You can get a little bit of rain and you don't have to stop. You can just keep on rolling. The planter stays clean. Your wheels stay clean. It just everything flows nice. So I'm a big fan. But so obviously this is planting into 2019 16-inch corn. All I did was move my GPS line over 30 inches. That worked really well. Really, really well. You don't need GPS. I mean, it's so easy to follow these rows. Yeah, I'm another big fan of that. I do need to get more flotation on my tractor. I did get quite a bit of compaction from the planter wheels and the tractor wheels. So these rows here, I did notice I had more weeds in those rows after I interseeded. I think a lot to do with the interseeder drill having a hard time getting through the soil and the trash. So get some more flotation out of my tractor, I think is going to help a lot. Here's a good example of how weeds love fertilizer. They've almost adapted to it over the years. But this picture, it talks for itself. This is all pigweed, and it's all growing, exactly where that fertilizer was placed. And you can see here, I placed it 4 inches in, right between the twin rows. And so if you, it helps a lot if you can ban that fertilizer. You can ban your weeds, and I think you're going to get a lot better control. If I had broadcast that fertilizer, this would all be solid pigweed. So it's a good example of getting that banded and keeping them down under that row of corn. And I hit it with the status, that 1 ounce. I wonder if I could bump that up a little bit. Cause it didn't kill them down in between the corn rows, but once the corn got bigger, it shaded out and they died on their own. I still don't like seeing it. I'd rather keep everything clean. So not flat around here, so it gets tricky. Trying to interseed on the hills, and that's where I use this little guy. So it's an AccuTrack hitch, 3-point hitch. It's got these little whisker sensors, and so when I get on the hills like this, it'll actually shift my drill uphill. Is it a must-have? No. I mean, you could still run without it. You just got to hug the upper side of the corn. But you can definitely run for 12 hours straight, and you start getting sloppy with your steering, you don't have to worry about running over your corn. Yeah, so that worked really good. Just a cheap Kraus drill. It's definitely wore out. It needs a lot of work, but it works better than that rotary hoe, so I'm happy with that. I do plan on putting some new disc openers on it and making some other changes to it. And all I did was loosen the units and pushed them over. You can see here, I just loosened up the U-bolts and push the units together as tight as I could. I mean, they're touching, they're so tight. So I'm getting about 6 inches of spacing. But the closer I got the seed together, less of a chance that the weeds are going to be exposed to sunlight. And, I want that cover crop to take off and keep everything else smothered.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
There's a question on having to do with slopes a little bit ago, and they wanted to know slope percents on your land, but also wondering if you had any terraced ground.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is a terrace right here. Terraces, there's one to the left of the photo. They're all over the place. Our farm has 20% slopes. You know, I run a side hill combine. But I tell you what, you know, after you interseed, but working with these wide rows and hills, it has been so much nicer. I love it for like spraying. Typically when I get to spray a hill like this, I'm running over corn if it's 30-inch rows, just because that thing wants to crab walk. But in a situation like this, you know, my front wheels are on the left side and my rear wheels are on the right side. I'm not running over any corn. And that even makes it nice when I go out and side dress too, is I can run around these hills, you know, and do later applications and not have to worry about running over corn. Definitely takes a lot of stress out at the end of the day too. So this is the mix I did just this last summer, and I'll probably make some tweaks, probably take a couple things out. You know, I don't know if I need the flax in there. You know, collards are good for having if you're gonna do some grazing. The clovers seem like they kind of have a hard time. I think they kind of get shaded out by the other plants. Even the antler ryegrass kind of had a hard time with all this stuff growing. But I did like the African cabbage. I'd say my favorite plant is the cowpeas. That is my number one favorite plant. I think it does the best in the shading. I think it produces a good amount of nitrogen. It just doesn't seem to have any problems anywhere I plant it. It grows. So I really like that. The radishes do nice. The sun hemp does very well, very well. So I got a pretty heavy mix of that. And what else? The buckwheat's nice. That grows good. It actually brings in. I notice it brings in a lot of pollinators when it's flowering. So I do like having buckwheat in there. Gourd mix. Basically, it was thrown in the mix almost for free. I don't know. It's just for the heck of it. Let's see what happens. Got a lot of gourds out of that deal. Lots and lots of gourds. Probably could have filled trucks full. But it was something to throw in and see what happens. So, but is it needed? No. But I do want to put that in the outside row and do more like vegetables, like a different mix of vegetables and stuff on the outside row of the corn with some more sunflowers and stuff like that. Call it the friendly neighbor mix, and just put that on the outside edge where it's going to get all the sunlight and grow into, you know, your lawn or wherever. So that's a fun one. Any questions on the mix?
Not yet.
Okay. Here it is coming up. You can see every single row. That drill worked nice. I really liked it. Now this is pretty unique. I had a lot of pigweed and water hemp that was always sick and wilting, and I'd pull them out of the ground to look at them, and the stems would be rotten. And you open them up, and I'd always find these little worms eating them. But you know, it's funny because they were never touching anything else. They weren't touching the corn. They weren't, you know, touching any of the other plants. They were always going after, you know, the pigweed. So I thought that was pretty. I had to get a picture of that because I thought that was pretty funny. Why? You know, some say that the weeds are easier to digest. I'm not a real expert on these little guys, but I've been told the Brix level. You know, if you have a higher Brix plant like the corn in your cover crop, you know, more beneficial species, you could carry higher Brix levels. These pests have a hard time digesting high Brix. I think that's what we're seeing here. And yeah, nature doing the work for you. You can see some liquid carbon coming off the corn roots here, some exudates. That's a good sign. I'm always happy to see that. So
Eric, there was a question about the cost per acre for your seed mix.
Yeah, so like that mix, that was about $40 an acre for that. I am in an equip program. I'm getting pretty close to that. So it's covering most of my seed cost. And then when I graze, I do custom grazing with the neighbor, and we worked it out where they basically pay the cost of the seed to graze it. So, with the equip program and the custom grazing, the seed cost is definitely covered. So yeah, this is in the fall. I mean, the whole field looked like this. It was just beautiful. Really, really happy with that mix. Nothing's overly dominant. Nothing's causing problems. And I was just really happy with that mix. So I'm sure I'd say you guys can take it, tweak it, use it however you want. But this is the results I got out of it. On the left, this is actually, it was 40 acres of conventional corn. And with the conventional herbicide program, we couldn't use, any of the any brassicas or radishes. So this here we did. I'm trying to remember. I know it was cereal rye, oats, and annual ryegrass. And I don't remember the rates, but the only thing that survived was the annual ryegrass. The cereal rye didn't do anything. The oats didn't do anything. But obviously, as you can see, the annual ryegrass did. And that worked pretty good. You don't have that diversity, but you still have living roots growing between the corn. And, it's still out there underneath the snow right now, feeding that biology and keeping things in place.
Eric, do you inoculate your legume seeds?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks.
So this was kind of a nice, a unique little plot we did. So my dad planted some cereal rye that we kept for seed, and they actually frost seeded clover, red clover, and they put that on with an air machine when they put the fertilizer on, and just mixed it right in with the fertilizer, put it on, frost seeded it early spring, and then that the cereal rye grew and the clover just stayed nice and small, but it never died. And then we actually cut the top off, harvested the heads, and then we came back and cut the straw and actually baled the straw off it. And this was in the fall. Or no, this is in the fall. Top right was in the fall after this. And then it overwintered and came back in the spring. This is early spring. It's starting to wake back up and come back to life. And so we never took any cuttings off it. And then I planted into it. It was supposed to get cut and baled. And the guy we had that was going to take it, it took too long to get there. And things weren't really working out with the price we were going to get paid for it. So I said, we got to get this corn in the ground. We had some extra seed. Let's just go plant it, see what happens. So on this little piece, I went out with the planter, didn't put any fertilizer on, just took the leftover seed we had, planted straight into it, green like you see, and planted that at 40,000 population because we knew we wouldn't get good emergence. We had a lot of rain. This was May 31st last year. And so it was the very last day we had to get the corn in the ground. And the soil was really wet. The planting conditions were not right. And so we did a high population, 40,000, because we knew we would have some loss. And we had the seed anyway. And this is, I had to go in and hit it with a full rate of status. And that laid down that clover pretty good. But I think if there was a way to lay this down flat, crimp it or something, roll it, get it laid down, because the corn did get pretty spindly coming up through this tall clover. And I think that would have helped a lot. But I mean, it still came up nice. And actually, we were really surprised with the emergence. It had pretty good emergence. There were some areas that weren't that great. But for the most part, I was shocked as well as it did. So I guess with the system I'm using, you got something in the spring, something growing in the summer, in the fall, in the winter. It's a year-round cycle, and that's what I'm after. I want to keep something growing. I want diversity. I want to keep this system moving all year round, feeding the biology, never sit and fallow. And that's my goal is to keep that ground active, keep pumping carbon in the ground. That's going to be the quickest change. I've been doing some measurements, some soil testing, some Haney tests, and every year my microbial activity nearly doubles. So this is definitely working. Not only on a soil test and numbers, but visually, it's absolutely transforming the soil so fast. I never thought it would happen this fast, but I suppose when you have, roots like this and diversity every year, and always green, always living, you're gonna get those results. I just, I was skeptical at first at how well this was actually gonna work, but I wanted to see for myself, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm happy to show you guys my results. I don't have a lot of data put together. Maybe someday I will. But I think pictures kind of talk for themselves. So hope you guys are enjoying it. Did some custom grazing. This was Behringer Farms, Lily Behringer. She put out a head of, she had 75 cows and calves. And she actually split this up into, I believe it was 5 paddocks. So 75 acres, 75 cows, so about a cow per acre. And she got just over 2 months of grazing out of it, not having to supplement anything. And she did weigh the calves, and she figured the calves put on about 2 pounds a day. Here, this was the first paddock here. And man, they cleaned that up fast. I mean, she probably could have kept them out there longer, but it was getting kind of late in the year. So we want to take advantage of all the growth, all the green. So, she moved them around pretty fast, and then she brought them back around to clean up the paddocks a second time. This is kind of that full circle system I was talking about, that nitrogen cycle using plants. There's so much going on below ground. As you guys all know, I don't have to explain this to you guys, but, it's something that you just don't think about. I used to view soil as just dirt, part of the recipe in farming. I never took a shovel out and dug it up and looked at it and paid any attention to it. I paid attention to, how much fertilizer do I got to put on, should I variable rate it here and there? And, I was always looking at technologies and the seed and fertilizer. I was never looking at, the soil, where it's growing from. So that's where I've really kind of changed my mindset was, changing the way I'm looking at the soil, starting from the ground. And I think that's going to come back around and really help my bottom line eventually. I mean, it already is. Just, for example, in 2020, I did a nitrogen trial on that field, second year, 60-inch corn. So I did a half rate of nitrogen in 20-foot strips across that field. And I had a 6 bushel difference across that field. So, cutting your nitrogen bill in half and 6 bushel, well, you're talking $5 corn now. So you got to find that happy medium. But I definitely know, pushing that test to the limit, knowing I can cut back. these covers are producing some nitrogen for me. And I'm holding it in place. Keeping something living is going to hold everything in place too, and even scavenge stuff, deep in the ground. This was just this fall, so this was the second year, second year 60s, and right where the shovel is where the corn row was in 2019. And lately I've been going out and digging it up, and they're gone. I mean, the root balls are almost non-existent. If you do find one, they just fall apart and crumble in your hand. There's hardly nothing left. It's just amazing how fast it's breaking down the old corn rows. Because that was my main concern is, I could probably do this for 2 years, do one row here, go over, move second year. But that third year, I got to jump back over and go into this row. And I'm like, there's still going to be root balls there. How's that going to work out? But, this fall, seeing what I saw when I dug things up, I know for a fact that I could go corn on corn for probably 5 years. Do I need to? No. Obviously I want to work, barley into my rotation, but this is just my one field. I'm just going to keep doing continuous corn in this little 25-acre piece and just kind of seeing what it does. I think this is one of the fastest ways to improving my soil is using a corn crop in wide rows and being able to get this diversity growing every year. And if I can just keep going back and forth, I mean, you still get a cash crop that yields the same. I mean, this is a pretty good system in my opinion. So, but the soil never used to look like that. I mean, you can see all the aggregates, all the roots, and it's just like chocolate cake. I couldn't stop running around with the shovel and digging holes. I just couldn't believe it. This used to be highly compacted clay, just brown clay, didn't have any dark tint to it. Just the fact that it's changing this fast and how soft it is, I can actually push the shovel in the ground. I don't have to jump on it anymore. I'm over the moon. Here are the gourds I was telling you guys about. Like I said, are they necessary? No, but they're fun to throw in. I would throw them in the outside row. That's what I would do next year. I'll put these little guys in the outside row. But the kids definitely had a lot of fun. I think that's my last slide. That's all I got. What time is it? Oh.
Yeah, just about right on the hour. There are a couple of questions. So first one, do you see a different response in cover crop growth and or corn yield in your north-south rows versus your east-west rows?
I hear about that a lot, and I think it does make a difference. I've heard from a lot of other guys on their trials that it did make a difference. But I do notice on my end rows, obviously I do have a lot of end rows, and the cover crop in the middle would kind of grow more off the side. Obviously it's getting shade. And then you could definitely tell, with the twin row, that inside or that outside row isn't getting as much sunlight, is smaller. So, and the ears are a little bit smaller. I've never done any sort of, yield check on that, but visually I do see a difference.
Thanks. What kind of manure are you applying and how many units of nitrogen do you estimate are available?
Well, we're about 4,500 to 5,000 gallons is what we put on. It's just pig manure is what we put on. Either they will pump it on with a hose or they use tanks. But honestly, it's been getting pretty frustrating. I feel like that the pig manure just isn't working as good as it used to. I know last year I didn't get a really good response out of it. It was wet in the spring and it got dry. So all my corn last year had hog manure except that 60 on 60 field that did a nitrogen trial just using synthetic nitrogen. And out of all my cornfields, the field that did not have hog manure yielded the best, and that had, you know, a lower rate on it. But I think I need to get a sample sent off the pig manure, see what's going on. I know they're feeding the pigs phytase, an enzyme now, and so they're absorbing all the phosphorus. And so now I have that extra cost that I have to apply phosphorus to the corn, to my program. So, you know, this pig manure is getting a little more expensive. You know, it's expensive to put on, and I'm not getting as much out of it as we used to. So I'm not a real big fan of it anymore.
There was specific interest in the chat box about your nitrogen program with the Y drop.
Yeah, so I just dropped on, it was a 28% liquid nitrogen. And the Y drops, I just use hog waters, and I just use a piece of hydraulic hose so they'd flex, and they actually just clamped onto my boom. I got everything from Fertilizer Dealer Supply. They put everything together for me, and then I got the hog waters from Hog Slat, and I built my own Y drops. It was like $1,400, and I've used that for quite a few years now. So, but you know, and then I used anhydrous hose. It seemed to have a little more stiffness to it and got out to that wider 60-inch rows, and that worked really well. And being able to put that nitrogen right next to the corn, I think that's key, because you got to remember these corn roots, they can't reach out, you know, 30 inches. You know, that's you got to ban that fertilizer. If so, I had one small field that it got all hog manure on it, and then I side dressed. It was too steep to use the Y drops, so I just used a cart, and I just broadcast AMS. Yeah, I think it was AMS. Spun that on, and so it was broadcast. It wasn't banded, and that field yielded almost 50 bushel less than everything else, because it was not close enough to the corn, and we weren't getting the rain to move that fertilizer to the corn. You know, the corn didn't have the water. You know, obviously you need water to move nutrients through the soil. We didn't have that. Now the other fields where I did, you know, use the Y drops, you know, definitely made a big difference. So same issue with the manure. You know, if you do have a dry year, you know, and you don't have the water to move the nutrients to the corn plant, you know, you're going to see an issue for sure. So get it banded as much as you can. I know in a lot of cases, obviously with manure, you can't.
And someone wants to know if you'll custom build a 60-inch planter for them.
Oh, I get to ask that all the time. It's easy. I'll write up a manual for you.
So are there any other questions or comments in the chat box anybody has? We still got plenty of time. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, or if I missed one.
If they want to see anything else, you guys want to see, go back, I can go back to old slides too.
Yeah, if there are any requests, speak up, and Eric can go back through to take another look at something. So you did mention when you were talking about your planter that you were considering making some changes for next year. What type of changes are you thinking of?
The main one's the flotation. You know, I did put, obviously with the 60-inch rows, I had to ditch my inside tires, so I'm only running 2 wheels. And tracks are not in my budget, so I'm trying to come up with a way. Maybe I could build like a tandem, walking tandem, with some nice flotation tires instead. But I really want to do is in furrow. And then when I do in furrow, I want to put on some molasses. The 721.3, I think that's what the Midwest BioAg has. And so I'd like to put that on in furrow and put some other products in with it. There's a product called Chitosan that's supposed to help, you know, fight off pests, keep pests away from the seed, you know, at the young stage. I have been using that chitosan product on the barley, malting barley. So instead of using fungicides in the barley, I started using this chitosan product, which will trigger the SAR response in the plant. And then that plant will actually produce its own chitin. And, you know, chitin is what all the exoskeleton of most pests. And that plant will actually, you know, protect itself. And same thing with pathogenic fungi. You know, that chitin will fight off that bad fungi and keep diseases at bay. So that's been a huge help with the barley. But yeah, the barley's been proven to be very, very hard to grow. I mean, you can grow feed barley, which is fine, but malting barley, the standards are so much higher. It's hard to hit the right standards, and you got to have those down levels so low, and such high quality. And it's just, I don't know if you can achieve that in Iowa, but I think if I keep going down this path with this regenerative approach, I definitely think I can get there. Because obviously that barley plant's getting everything from the soil, all the nutrients. And if I can build a big microbial a community that will, you know, obviously live on the roots of the barley and give that barley what it needs to protect itself, I think that's going to be, you know, the best way to win in that situation.
There was a question too about somebody's curious about if you've planted covers with success in 30-inch rows.
Yep. The biggest thing with 30-inch rows, like I was saying in the beginning, you really want to watch your like the population and hybrid. Selecting the right hybrid, I think, is huge. Even if with these wide rows, I've noticed different hybrids play a big role on how much growth I have out of the covers. For me, with the wide rows, a short stature corn with upright leaves, I'm going to get a lot of growth, but I'm going to get some yield drag. I know I will. I've seen it myself, just the different hybrids in the farm just last year. You know, you're going to get more growth out of your cover crop, which is good for grazing. So, you know, go with the short corn, upright leaves, you get more covers, a little less yield, but you get better grazing. So you got to find that balance. But if you're really going after yields in your corn, but you don't need all the biomass for grazing, you'll still get the benefit from the diversity of the root exudates. You know, that plant might only get 6, 8 inches tall, but you're still gonna get the benefit from having diversity in roots. And the same thing goes with a 30-inch corn. If you want to get that cover to survive the shade, you know, pick a corn that's short. Like I picked a Pioneer 0589 last year, and really short corn, upright leaves, and I got a lot of growth for grazing. And the year before, I had a Whiffles 4196. Those are big, tall corn, big leaves, you know, big 4-foot long leaves. It actually created a canopy, and it was choking my covers. And these wide rows, it was still choking the covers out, but the yields were amazing. So, you know, it's all about that sunlight balance, balancing your sunlight. And same goes for 30-inch corn. If you want the covers to survive, you know, look at your hybrids.
And then are those the corn ear types fixed or flex hybrid?
I've been just using flex. I've never really played around with fixed or flex. I'd be curious to see what a fixed ear does in a high population. But let's see, I'll go back. I planted some conventional. And this conventional corn was 40,000 population. This is a non-GMO, and it yielded very well. I was really blown away with how well it yielded at 40,000 population and how well it stood. That too is the standability on this corn versus 30s it stands a lot better. I think it's the opposite of what people think. But yeah, I've only ever used a non-GMO or a full flex, so I'm not really sure on the fixed.
And there's another question with your 60-inch rows, how big was your first plot and how much did you expand it in the second year?
Yeah, so the first year was just 25 acres, and now all my corn is 60-inch twin rows, and so it's about 200 acres. That's all corn. So it works out good to have, with our rotations, like 200 acres of corn, 200 of beans, 200 of barley, and about 200 acres of barley is about my max production for the year. So it works really good in a rotation on the farm.
And somebody's curious about your green screen, your screensaver behind you. They're wondering what the darker green strip in the field is.
Oh, I can move out of the way. Are they talking about this part here?
I'm not sure. Fred, if you could clarify which green strip in the field you're talking about in the comment box, that would be helpful.
So this is actually right where my thumb is. My dad's combining. So I took the drone up and this is corn that's still standing in this picture here. And that's the combine.
He's talking about the opposite side.
On the opposite, oh, it's just a waterway. That's a waterway, and then there's terraces. And those two strips there, those are terraces. So it's hard to tell in that photo, but that field, that's probably one of the steepest fields we have, and that does have 20% slopes on it.
Thanks, Eric. Somebody's curious, have you tried single row 60-inch versus twin row?
Nope, I have not. My dad did by accident. But no. We had the twin row planter for beans, so it's something we already owned. So I just use what I got. But I really like being able to keep the spacing, maintaining the spacing between the corn plants. That it's the same as 30-inch corn. So that initial emergence, I don't have to worry about emergence as much as you do if you do single row 60. You want to get really good spacing because if they're too close together, they're going to compete. But with the twin row, you don't have to go quite as slow to get that good spacing. But that's just my opinion there. So I don't have any experience with single 60s though.
Well, do we have any other questions? Oh, here we go. Somebody just put a good one in there, it looks like. All right, so Caroline said, very interesting. We are running field trials comparing 30-inch versus 60-inch rows with and without cover crop in Quebec, Canada. About 10 to 15 farmers have tried these solar corridor systems in our province in 2019 and 2020. Cool. They have observed a 20 to 30% reduction in corn yield under 60-inch rows. Do you think your corn yields will increase over time in these systems as your soil health improves?
Well, like I said, last year, 2020, my best field out of all the fields was the 60 on 60. So being able to move over and plant into that strip of cover crops, it showed the most resiliency through the drought. We did have, this year, we did have a field that actually, this one here on the left, this conventional corn was planted right across the ditch in 30-inch rows. And this row of 60s conventional with this interseeding planted at a higher population, it did yield, it was almost 40 bushel an acre better. But this did not have hog manure on it. I actually Y dropped most of the nitrogen on versus the other field with 30-inch corn that was all hog manure applied right before planting. And it seemed like this year, it just seemed like our hog manure didn't work this year. So it's not a good comparison, but I know for sure that the second year 60-inch corn definitely shows better health. And I think the corn's gonna be more resilient to, under stress. But as far as seeing yield drags, I have not seen yield drags, but I also ban the fertilizer. And I think that's a key point guys are missing is, they're thinking that corn can reach out that far and it can't. So you got to get the fertilizer banned in that corn row so it doesn't have to work as hard to get the nutrients it needs. And then two, hybrid selection. I definitely noticed a hybrid that's shorter with shorter leaves will actually yield less than normal. And then a hybrid that's tall, it's got big leaves on it. You're going to capture more sunlight than you would in a typical 30-inch system. I believe that will out yield 30-inch in a 30-inch system, same hybrid. And that's just with the data I've collected, that the hybrid plays a big role. And then obviously seed spacing, the spacing of the plants plays a pretty big role, and then fertilizer placement. So there's a lot that goes into this to make yields work. It's not something where you just turn one row off and go. There's a lot of aspects you got to take a look at.
Thanks, Eric. Well, do we have any other remaining questions for Eric? And Eric, if anyone has any questions or they want to follow up with you on anything, is there a way that they can reach you?
I just kind of bounce on Twitter once in a while. That's probably the best way.
What's your Twitter handle?
At 60-inch corn farmer. Easy to remember. I get on there a couple times a week.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thank you all very much for joining us for the first Farminar of the season. And thank you so much, Eric, for putting together all these photos and outlining what your experience has been and answering folks' questions tonight.
Yeah, not a problem. It's fun. So I hope everyone enjoyed it.
I will be sending out an email tomorrow morning to everybody, and I can include Eric's Twitter handle and the survey link as well. But please, when you do close out of this Zoom, you should be prompted in your browser with an evaluation survey form, and we really do appreciate your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind taking just 2 minutes to fill that out, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Good night, Eric.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.